Good morning, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. In today's update, new surveillance video just released shows the moment shooters opened fire at a Miami banquet hall over the weekend. Police are investigating videos like this one obtained by ABC affiliate WPLG, which shows the crowd gathered outside before that shooting left 2 dead and more than 20 people injured. 3 people opened fire on that party early Sunday morning before driving off in an SUV. You can see them there getting out of the car. Police say they've now recovered that SUV, but they're still searching for the suspects. And people were out in full force over Memorial Day weekend as more than half of America's adult population is now fully vaccinated. More than 7 million people were screened at U.S. airports between Thursday and Sunday, breaking air travel records and projections. And check out these images from the Indy 500, the biggest sporting event in the world since the start of the pandemic, packed with 135,000 fans. It was also the biggest weekend at the box office since the shutdown last March. A Quiet Place Part 2 earned $57 million over the weekend, the biggest 4-day theatrical opening since early 2020. And President Biden has issued a proclamation recognizing June as LGBTQ Pride Month. Biden said Pride is a time to recall the trials the LGBTQ plus community has endured and to rejoice in the triumphs of trailblazing individuals who have bravely fought and continue to fight for equality. Biden also called on Congress to pass the Equality Act, which he says would ensure civil rights protections for LGBTQ people across the country. And President Biden is heading to Oklahoma today, where he'll become the first sitting president to visit the site of the Tulsa race massacre. It's been 100 years since an estimated 300 black people were killed by a white mob and an entire community was destroyed. Now the community is gathering to remember the painful history that has been buried for so long. ABC's Marcus Moore is in Tulsa with the latest. Marcus, good morning.
Diane, this morning, it's incredibly moving to think that at about this time, 100 years ago, that the massacre would have been well underway and people running from their homes in the middle of the night into an uncertain future, and the results would impact families for generations. President Biden is expected to arrive here a little bit later this morning, and he's scheduled to tour the Greenwood Culture Center, and he's also planning to meet with survivors of the massacre and also the descendants of those connected to this horror. And we also understand that the president is expected to lay out his plan to address racial income inequality in this country, and also a reinvestment in black communities, just like Greenwood, by boosting the federal contracting to small disadvantaged businesses by 50%. That's an estimated $100 billion over 5 years, along with creating rules to address discrimination in housing. But observers this morning have said that his plan falls far short of specific reparations for the survivors of the massacre, and then more broadly, the NAACP organization. They're criticizing the Biden administration, it says, for failing to address the student loan debt crisis. The president of that organization says that if the Biden administration wants to close the wealth gap for black Americans in this country, you can't do that without addressing that issue of student loan debt for so many Americans. Diane.
All right, Marcus Moore in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thanks, Marcus. And when we come back, we'll talk to the actor committing $1 million to helping survivors of the Tulsa race massacre and their descendants. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's been 100 years since an estimated 300 black Americans were killed in the Tulsa race massacre, and an entire neighborhood was destroyed. Now the community is gathering to remember the painful history that has been buried for so long. To mark the anniversary, Hill Harper, actor and founder of the Black Wall Street digital wallet, is committing $1 million from the platform to survivors of the Tulsa race massacre and their descendants. And Hill Harper joins me live now to tell us more about this initiative. Hill, first of all, thanks so much for being here. Talk me through, what's your connection to the Tulsa massacre, and why did you decide to get involved in this way?
You know, I think that we're all connected to the Tulsa massacre, no matter if you're white or black in this country, because it is the largest state-sanctioned race riot and massacre in the history of this country, and yet it's not talked about. I believe there are only 2 public school textbooks that actually even mention it, and we have to confront our history if we're going to be able to move forward. And I think that commemorating this centennial that took place yesterday and today, 100 years ago, is an important place. And that's why I am here in Tulsa and spend time on Greenwood. And we've launched a company called the Black Wall Street Digital Wallet in commemoration, in honor of that event, in honor of the community that was extremely vibrant, that people have to know about, and how successful they were as African-American businesses and families.
So tell me about the Black Wall Street digital wallet. What's the objective, and how does it work?
The objective is to literally replicate the successes of what the original Greenwood District or Black Wall Street was. I believe there were three pillars that made it successful. One, institutional ownership. We owned the businesses. Two, institutional trust. We trusted each other and transacted with each other. And three, the movement of money or capital within the ecosystem, where a dollar changed hands 60 to 100 times before it left, up to a year to 2 years to 3 years before it left the ecosystem. Right now, a dollar leaves the Black community within 6 to 7 hours. And I believe if we don't start owning our own digital wallets, as we're moving into digital currency, it'll be leaving between 6 to 7 seconds. You can't actually create a network effect of capital appreciation if you're not exchanging money. So this is the first Black-owned digital wallet to compete, obviously, with a PayPal or a Venmo or a Cash App or a Zelle or an Apple Wallet. And I believe as we're moving towards digital currency and cryptocurrency, we can actually take advantage of that as a community, recirculate dollars, create jobs, and create successful new businesses.
I know you're also working with the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. They're hosting several events to mark the anniversary today. What's on the schedule for today?
Today, well, obviously, the President of the United States is coming into town, and but importantly, where I am right now is an economic empowerment day, which is many business leaders as well as community leaders are coming together to talk about how ultimately we can empower. You know, I truly believe you can't have social justice without economic justice, and that's what this is about. We want to solve things, but we really have to support economic foundation of African-American communities. You know, right now, Prosperity Now came out with a study talking about the road to zero wealth. If we don't change the course of what's happening, they predict that African Americans will be at zero wealth by 2053, and Latino Americans are only about 20 years behind. So obviously, there's a massive racial wealth gap. We have to do things to address it, and I think we can address it through meeting and talking about solutions through the private sector. It doesn't have to be government solutions all the time. We can actually solve this by coming together like this, sharing ideas and supporting each other's businesses.
And you mentioned that President Biden is set to give an address there in Tulsa today. He's supposed to announce some new policies that he says will combat the racial wealth gap. What do you hope to hear from him today?
You know, I hope to hear support for startups, small businesses, tech investment, training in emerging technology. We need to create jobs. Ultimately, if you don't have income, you can't recirculate dollars. But yet, and still, as African Americans, we have $1.2 trillion of spending power, and we need to leverage that smartly. The other thing is HR 40. I'm hoping he's going to mention HR 40, which was put before Congress. It's all about getting reparations for the survivors and the descendants from this place. You got to understand, no insurance claim has ever been paid out, no reparations have ever been paid, and it was a state-sponsored massacre. 300 African Americans, mostly men and business leaders, were killed, and it was completely destroyed. And importantly, the first time American citizens were bombed by the air on American soil was not Pearl Harbor, was not 9/11. It was actually right here, the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma Air National Guard dropped bombs on this entire 35-block community. It was a horrific massacre. We commemorate that, and we have to, 100 years later, figure out ways to build back and move forward.
All right, Hill Harper, great to have you today. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Good luck to you. And today marks the start of Pride Month as well. When we come back, ABC News contributor LZ Granderson is with us to talk about his new podcast aiming to celebrate what he calls the joys of living life out loud. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Pride Month kicks off around the world today, aimed at spotlighting the struggles and accomplishments of the LGBTQ plus community. ABC News contributor LZ Granderson is marking the occasion with the launch of his new podcast, Life Out Loud with LZ Granderson. Now, the podcast is all about preserving the history of the community and celebrating the joys of living life out loud. Take a listen.
Underrepresented, untold, undiscovered. These are the stories I want to tell. I'm LZ Granderson, host of a new podcast from ABC Audio with a simple mission: to preserve the history of the LGBTQ community. We're kicking off Pride Month with the 2-episode premiere of Life Out Loud with me, LZ Granderson, on June 1st. New episodes drop every Thursday in June, and the celebration just keeps rolling right until July. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
And LZ Granderson joins me live now to tell us more all about it. LZ, first of all, congratulations. How do you feel?
I feel excited. You know, I'm really excited for the ABC Pride team that really rallied together to help put this podcast together. I know obviously my name is attached to it, and you know, it was my idea. But this would not be here without so many incredible and talented individuals within the ABC Disney family who sacrifice their own personal time and weekends and hours on holidays to help put this together. So I'm excited for myself, but I'm more excited for them because they pour so much of themselves into getting these stories out there. So
tell me about the title. Why did you decide on Life Out Loud? What does that mean to you?
You know, it means a lot of things to me. The first thing I wanted to do was to make sure that any podcast that I was attached to that dealt with the LGBTQ community wasn't just about our griefs, our losses, our disappointments, and our pains. I certainly remember growing up in the 90s and into the 2000s that LGBTQ people, especially gay men, were either comedic relief or dying. We weren't allowed to have complete lives. Will and Grace, for some reason, a good-looking lawyer in the heart of Manhattan, had a difficulty actually being seen in bed with another man, which is a world I am not familiar with. But that's sort of the world that we have been seeing within the public. So the ideal of Life Out Loud is to be able to show our whole selves, our true selves, and not just a sanitized version to make heterosexual and cisgender people feel better.
So you sat down with some big names. Are there some interviews that kind of stick out to you? And was there a common thread that you found emerging as you're hearing more and more about people's stories?
Oh man, asking me for my favorite conversation from season 1 is like asking for my favorite child. Actually, it's not, because I only have one child, so I know who the favorite child is because I only have one.
That one's easy.
That one's easy. Obviously, you know, Dr. Fauci is a rock star, has been a rock star, but being able to revisit the early days of the AIDS crisis with him was really informative, painful, but also informative. I was really into the interview with Sherry Cola, the star of the hit show Good Trouble. She's a bisexual, Asian American, queer woman who, you know, is able to talk about a whole litany of conversations, including anti-Asian, crimes, hate crimes that unfortunately have been, peppered around the nation essentially since the beginning of the pandemic. So we get serious on some topics. We certainly have a lot of fun on topics. But what I love about season 1 in particular is that we really dive headfirst into intersectionality. So even though this is about LGBTQ community and pride, there's so many more aspects that we are attached to and connected with that we get to explore this podcast. And I'm just happy to be a vessel for these conversations.
And now in the press release, you just mentioned the AIDS epidemic. You mentioned that in the press release as well. And you said we lost so many stories to the AIDS epidemic, violence, harassment, and silence due to fear. So how are you hoping to both combat that and raise awareness about it now?
Well, number one, simply being able to live life out loud with our guests, to talk about our history and our past. You just did a segment talking about the Tulsa massacre that unfortunately happened 100 years ago this weekend. A lot of people don't know about that massacre because it's not being taught in our history books, it's not being taught in school. Similarly, a lot of people don't know about LGBTQ history. A lot of people are, only think of LGBTQ people when it comes to Stonewall and AIDS. and then marriage equality. And that's essentially it. So hopefully this podcast joins the whole litany of docuseries and documentaries and other podcasts that are trying to rally together our history to make it known, not simply because we want to puff our chest out about our contributions to society, though that is important, but it's also important so that we don't repeat the same mistakes and that young queer kids can see a reflection of themselves throughout history and not grow up thinking they're alone. So this podcast and me along with the team, our goal is obviously to celebrate life out loud, but it's also to make sure that we do what Harvey Milk encouraged all of us to do when he was running for office, and that is giving people hope. We still got to give people hope. I know we've got a lot of victories. I know that Lil Nas X is gyrating with the devil and all of that, but that does not mean that the LGBTQ plus community has full equality, and I'm hoping to draw attention to some of the areas where we fall short as a nation.
Well, and so let's expand on that a little bit, because it's been over 50 years since the Stonewall riots, when members of the gay community stood up to being subject to police raids just for being gay. So how far have we come as a nation on equality for the LGBTQ plus community, and how far do we have left to go?
Oh boy, how far we have left to go? That is a very complicated question, because where we're going, it all depends upon who you're asking on the road or on the journey. We're not a monolithic group of people. We are connected in our desires to want full equality, but how we go about it and what that looks like varies from person to person, from situation to situation. I can tell you from our reporting, numerous times I was reminded by trans people in our community, particularly trans women of color, who didn't give a damn about marriage equality because they were just trying to eat or just trying to survive. Their issues and their concerns may be slightly different than someone who is in a monogamous marriage relationship who's concerned about coming out and being fired as a teacher, for instance. They have a different level of concern. So there are a lot of different answers to that question. I'm not trying to duck it. I'm not trying to split hairs. I'm just trying to emphasize that we're at different points within this struggle for full equality. But ultimately, the goal of the entire community is to have full equality for everyone, which I would think is a goal not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but for Americans in general. And as far as where we are today, still in half the country, depending upon your employer, you can be fired for being gay or being trans or being bi. You could lose your housing. We obviously, as I talked about earlier, just having our history denied in school and in the teachings is an erasure of a whole community and our contributions that has long-lasting impact. In the state of Arizona, for instance, there was actually a local state official who tried to get the word homosexuality banned from sex education classes. Imagine teaching sex education classes without using the word homosexuality. That's what that one local official tried to do. Fortunately, she was forced to walk those statements back. But it's just a glimpse into how far officials are still going to try to deny just our rights, but our very existence. So I understand a lot of my queer brothers and sisters are disappointed we won't be able to march. A lot of us are still doing pride marches because of the pandemic virtually. But that should not mean that the importance of pride should be denounced or that the importance of pride has somehow lost its meaning. Because the most important weapon that we have against inequality and against oppression, against people like that official I talked about in Arizona, is coming out and being proud by pushing back against these laws, pushing back against these narratives, pushing back against this violence. So I'm happy that we're launching during Pride, if for no other reason to remind people that it's still important that we are out and that we are proud and that we're living our lives out loud.
All right, and you sure are, LZ. Thanks so much for joining us. Always great to have you.
Great, thank you so much for having me. And listen to the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm about to plug it right now. Be sure to check out Life Out Loud with LZ Granderson. It's debuting today. You can listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all other major listening platforms. And we cannot wait to listen in. LZ, thanks again. And that does it for this ABC News Live update. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern for The Breakdown. Stay safe.
Mike Q to New York. Stand by, ready 3, take 3, Mike Q. 3, start to slow zoom in a little bit. Roll tape, take 3. Ready 13, full. Ready camera 3, 1 center up.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Lois Hart. Now here's the news.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.